Okay. All right. Is it recording now? Okay, great. So the question is, what do I start with? So we've all been bombarded probably with all these links and different handouts and Google Docs and tutorials on how to use this tool or that tool. But what do I start with? How do I start thinking about moving my course online? And how do I navigate through this world of resources, and how not to get lost? So what is the first thing or first things that I need to do as a teacher to start teaching online tomorrow or in a week or in a couple of days? So Shannon, can you start?
Sure. Those are difficult questions. The first thing I want to say is that I think the first thing we should do is be kind to ourselves. It's a really difficult time for everybody for so many reasons. And taking your classes that you plan to teach in one way and trying to put them into another way of teaching at the very last minute is a very, very difficult situation to be in. And it would be different than if you were going to plan this from the beginning. So I think we just need to be kind to ourselves first. And I think our students will be understanding of us as well. They know that it's new for many of us, and I think that they will be kind to us as well. So having reasonable expectations for yourself and your students. And I think you already gave me the answer. Thank you, Zhenya, for saying goals. So if you can go back to your course, think about what your main goals are in your course. What are the most important things that you want your students to get out of that, of your course, and prioritize. Think about what you can do online and what you might need to do in a different way than you expected to do it. And that kind of ties into the second question, so maybe we'll come back to that a little bit more, but how not to get lost in tools and resources. There are a lot of really cool tools out there, and there are a lot of places that you can get information right now. So some examples are, there's some Facebook groups that you can join, there are webinars going on, and it's easy to get lost. I think my advice would be to start with the tools that your university offers. And that's because they are trained in and they are ready to support you in using those tools. So I would say to start with those that your university is offering for you. And I'm pretty sure that, or your school as well, I'm pretty sure that they have a lot of resources that they're starting to offer to you. It took our university a couple of days to get organized, but now they're having webinars almost all day, every day, that anyone can join in order to learn something about those tools. And so I would say if you're getting started, start with those tools that you have that built-in support for.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Colleagues, what can you add to Irina? Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to add, could not agree more with Shannon about being kind to ourselves, and in a way to understand that we will not be able to recreate online exactly what we do in the classroom. It's just not possible. And that's something that we need to communicate to our students as well. So online will not replace what we do in the classroom. We have to adapt, we have to change, we have to be creative, and we have to forgive ourselves and our students for maybe moving slower than we thought. Another thought that I have, and that has been actively discussed at Brandeis, is that we will not be able to cover all of the material that we planned for this semester. So maybe a safe place to start would be, if we use a textbook, to immediately cut out the last chapter planned for this semester and assume that you're not going to get to it. if it happens that the speed is picked up very quickly by you and by the students, you can always add it to your plan. But the recommendation is don't plan to cover everything that you originally planned for this semester.
Thank you. Tom, do you want to add something? Tom, you need unmute. Okay.
There we go. I just would add one thing there that's sort of a codicil on what Ida was saying. Again, I also agree with both of the previous sets of comments. It's such a great coincidence, I suppose, that in the last couple of years to focus a great deal at our conferences and a lot of professional development has been on backward design, the idea of looking at our ultimate goals in a sequence. In fact, this is a little different from what Ida was saying, in that rather than looking at our courses as a sequence of chapters, rather where do we want our students to be at the end of this term? Because indeed, this whole situation has caught us in medias res. We're here we are right plunk in the middle of, or at the beginning of the spring semester. In the case of universities, K through 12 have even a tougher situation as I understand it. And what I think we all need to keep in mind, besides not to beat up on ourselves, is keep those goals in mind, whether you've got your courses designed as proficiency oriented, I hope they are, but as proficiency goals at the end of the course, communicative goals at the end of the course, and think not of how the tools and technology can drive the course now that we can't meet our students face to face, but rather how can we still get to those, as close to those goals as possible. And here's where Ida and I think we'll come back together again, rather than thinking of, well, should I just cut the last chapter, the last unit, of, well, how close can I get to the goal and still feel that I brought our students to the point of why it is they're taking second semester, second year, or second semester, third year, whatever the course is. I think it's a chance for us really to put into kind of to walk the walk, not just talk the talk of backward design, and really see if we can make our courses use the technology out there rather than have the technology drive our courses.
Right. And I think principle of less is more is a very good one. And when I look at all these available tools for us, all these cute or cool and cute little, game creators, or, everything that's available, I want to try them all. I want to use them all, but do I need to? And will it overwhelm my students if I start using all of a sudden? Maybe somebody's been using Kahoot for the whole life, but and students get used to it. But if we start using all these cool tools and bombard students with them, that might be counterproductive, and will be the fatigue, and will just our energy. Will waste their energy. So I would say, let's just focus on one or two tools that that's available to you, and use the capabilities and what they can provide, and all these old tools, like maybe Google Docs is the old tool for someone, or just Canvas or Moodle that you've been using. Just find resources there rather than bring the new tools in and try to use them.
And I wanted to add one more thing. When we're changing, change never comes with kind of a lot of positive feelings, especially when it's when it's forced upon us from outside. It's not something that we initiated internally. But even at these times, we can find something positive. Не бывает худо без добра. One of the things that I told my students is that rarely second semester, first year students learn vocabulary for internet, Zoom, online learning, etc. And now is a great opportunity. Rarely students in the first year learn how to type. Maybe in some places, yes, not at our university. Usually second year starts typing, first year is still writing. Well, now is a great opportunity. So finding something positive in this is also important, and it is positive. A lot of vocabulary that is related to, for example, doing things on Zoom is very useful vocabulary that we could teach, like делиться экраном, mixing languages here. Делиться экраном. Делиться is a good verb to have, no matter where you use it. Выключать, включать звук. Проверка динамиков, проверка микрофона. Проверка is a good word to have. So we can use this opportunity to, and that's Tom, I'm connecting to you, that we shouldn't be married to our textbooks anyway. We should be goal driven. And here maybe we will step outside of the themes or the normal topics that we cover in first or second year, and we'll introduce this vocabulary, and students will be having fun with this.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to say something that it's related to high school students. For them, it's completely new setting. They almost never used this way. They got used to the classroom, real classroom with the teacher. And for some of them, it's a real shock that they are on their own. They're not college students who choose this subject. They must to take Russian, for example, in our school, and especially grammar and many things. It's much more questions at this level. If they're 15 years old, 14 years old, and understanding our students and situation in their family, also, God forbid, if something happened for high school students, I'm sure for the younger students too, it's very, very important moment.
Okay, let's move on with our questions. Thank you all. Let me just go back to sharing my screen. So the next question is, what is the main difference between teaching online and face-to-face? Which elements are transferable and which are not, and why? What is hard to achieve in an online classroom? What is doable? I believe Shannon will also start our discussion here.
I'll start it. I don't know the answer though. Some of the differences between online and face-to-face. I think one of the things that's more difficult in the online environment is kind of keeping tabs on your students. And in online courses, there's a bigger attrition than in face-to-face courses, meaning students don't finish the course maybe, or some students find it difficult to have the self-discipline to complete courses when they don't have a teacher helping them structure it. And obviously, even online, we can help them structure it, and that's one thing that's really important in moving your class online, is that I would say that there are two elements to that. One is communication, that you keep those lines of communication open with your students, because it's a lot easier for them to know to come in, at 10 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that you'll tell them what's coming up in the class, than having to kind of keep track of it on their own. And then also the organization of your course is really important, so that they know where to find everything. Those are, I would say, two of the big elements that you need in order to help students with that difficulty of kind of keeping the fact that it's a little bit more difficult to keep tabs. I like that people are talking about, like Irina was talking about, opportunities, because I think for students there are opportunities. There are also opportunities for us, because of all the people that I know who teach online, they've all said that it has enhanced their face-to-face teaching as well. And I think you learn skills that you can then put into your face-to-face classes. And there are some things that I think work maybe as well or better, even though they work differently online. So one example of that is that if you have a lesson that students maybe have different levels or skill levels or talent levels or whatever you would want to call it, and some can go through quicker and some need to go through more slowly. Online materials can sometimes facilitate that they can watch it 3 times instead of just 1 time. And so there are a lot of opportunities for us here. in putting some of our materials online. So I think there are some pluses to it as well. And, you know, it may take some time to get over the shock before we can really dig into those, but I think they are there. I'm not sure if I answered everything. I can't remember the question, but I'll let my colleagues follow up on me.
I can say a couple of things as well, just very more detailed maybe what I noticed working in Zoom, for example. It is very hard, if not impossible, to do frontalная работа when you want the entire class to answer your question together as a chorus. So very quickly we go through the conjugation of a verb before we actually start using it in speech. I just want to remind of a particular form. They cannot all answer at once in Zoom. It just doesn't work. The technology doesn't work that way. So we have to adapt, and instead of expecting all of them to answer your question, or most of them to answer your question, you have to call on students, and you have to call on them more often maybe than in the real classroom. So even for phonetic work, for vocabulary work, you want to ask students to pronounce or read something one by one, rather than asking them to do it in a chorus. So speaking of those, like some people were asking in the questions submitted for the roundtable, how do I do drills? If you want to do form-focused exercises, it will not work with the whole group. It can only work one by one. But that is also maybe the good part of it. Like Shannon said, we all know about differentiation in our classrooms, and some students have better phonetic skills than others. And so that allows us to work more on a more individual basis, более точечная работа.
As the boomer in the room, I would add to these two sets of very, very good recommendations. I'll invoke Gorbachev here and talk just for a minute about человеческий фактор. That what is the most apparent to someone, especially I think, is partly teaching at a university. Natasha, I'm sure you've got even stronger things to say about what I'm about to say. As long as our audience still has a lot of millennials in it in particular, and now moving toward Gen Z, maybe even more, the lack of immediacy in communication on many of the platforms that we use in online instruction can be a real impediment to good, what we feel as good teachers, good interaction in a classroom. There may be either non-spontaneity, non-immediacy, even though it may be synchronous, the response time is still very much asynchronous compared to proper human discourse. That said, so many platforms now do allow us, say, to add in the, say, in a chat room environment or something, more immediacy, more interaction. Even at the highest level of interaction, I've noticed, though, even when I've got completely synchronous Zoom interaction with an entire group where they actually are talking with each other in chat rooms, I'm responding to what they're saying in real time. There's still not that proximity of the instructor or between and among the participants of being literally in each other's face that does affect the way both communication and interaction occurs. And so I think as much as we can get used to that fairly quickly, so that the kinds of interaction that we're asking our students to do don't rely on that kind of immediacy. There are other ways we can do that using the platforms that we have, other kinds of tasks and situations we can put the students, the learners into, so that there isn't that feel of non-responsiveness of the interlocutor.
Mm-hmm.
And another challenge that I ran into as well, teaching using Zoom, is that I cannot see the entire class at once if it's more than 5 or 6 students. So right now, for example, at the top of my screen, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 videos. So I see 6 people, and I'm one of them. So that's 5. And then I can click on the arrow to go to the right, and then I see more. And if I change the way the layout works so that it's a kind of a vertical line, it covers up the screen, the material that I have on the screen. So that's another challenge that we really, with bigger classrooms, and high schools probably are affected even more by this, that just to remember everybody who is in our class, even if we don't see them, to call on them to make sure that they also participate when we're in the main room. But I agree that breakout rooms are a savior for us. We can and should be breaking them up as much as possible. But again, it removes that interlocutor, that physical interlocutor, and it slows things down a little bit. So in reality, when I teach in class and I tell students, 5 minут с партнером, they have to do something. The reality is it's not always 5 minutes. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 4.5, sometimes it's 6. It just depends, because I'm managing the time. The machine manages time precisely. So if it's 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes. And then it's another minute for them to exit the room and for the microphones to be turned on. So those precious seconds and minutes are lost. And if you have only 15 minutes of the lesson, plan less. And that's where Evgeny's advice again is good. Less is more. Plan less. I mean, be prepared to have the material to go if everything is working out, but plan for less.
And it's also, like you mentioned before, 34 students in a classroom. It's not realistic to even have a Zoom classroom alive. And it's interesting that so many departments of education across the states, different states, they not suggest to have it. They would like to have more like writing to each other, but not face-to-face with the high school students, I mean. And the Google Classroom, it's a good platform to do it. We're using in a classroom. It could be used for the classwork. It's immediate response. You could put a time frame and you will have a respond, but not visual response from the students.
So those asynchronous assignments also, Shannon, I was wondering if you could talk about it, because it seems to me like, from what I've tried to do, asynchronous teaching requires even more prep time than doing online lessons. And so if there is a choice, I feel like with smaller classes at the college level, I would prefer to continue teaching online with maybe a couple of asynchronous assignments here and there. But is my sense correct that it takes more time? I'm thinking I have to live at least a week ahead of the students with those assignments. And where do I find time now to do that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me about that, because that was one thing I wanted to talk about. That was kind of one of the points I wanted to get to, this asynchronous versus synchronous debates. And I think this is interesting in how it's unfolding on social media, how people are talking about it. We have to have legitimate concerns about synchronous meetings, in that, for one, you might have students in different time zones, as someone mentioned in the chat. For two, you could have students who don't have great internet, and the synchronous meetings are a little more difficult in that sense. So we do need to consider that. But there are some people who are advocating for all asynchronous assignments, and I am not sure I agree with that either, at least personally. I think everyone has to make their own choice for their own situation. But for me, I think that, number one, we are if we're taking a face-to-face class and putting it online, we and our students are more used to that synchronous communication. And I agree with you that having asynchronous assignments takes more prep time. And it's different from what we are used to. In addition to that, I do think that if you have your class being all asynchronous, there are some students who are more liable to fall through the cracks. I think having some time where they're meeting and seeing you and seeing their classmates that they know makes them feel a little more like there's a community. And I don't want to say that there aren't ways to have community asynchronously, but it's a little more difficult. So I don't know, in my opinion, a balance is good if we can have that right now.
Right. There are a couple of questions that I would like to ask you guys before we move on. My biggest concern is losing my lesser motivated students entirely by the end of the year. Any suggestions for good speaking modalities other than Zoom?
By modalities, do you mean, what do you think we mean by modalities? Like tools?
Platform?
Okay. I mean, the thing that I use in my hybrid course, most of the time I teach hybrid courses now, I do use Flipgrid for asynchronous communication, and you can have students, you can make a prompt, and then students can respond to you and each other. So that is one idea.
And I could add to this that if you feel overwhelmed by the amount of technology you have to learn right now, maybe even yesterday, you could just ask students to submit oral samples of speech by simply recording themselves on their phones or their computers. It doesn't even have to be anything special. Flipgrid allows us to organize the whole thing and to create this semblance of human communication, asynchronous, albeit, but some kind of organization. But you could give a prompt even on your course management site or by email, and then ask students to upload to Google Classroom or send you by email their samples. If you're worried that they're reading, you can ask them to do a video recording rather than an audio recording, and a video recording where you could see their entire body. As I tell my students, I need to see your entire organism. So that I can see that you're not actually looking down at some kind of index cards. And in fact, that's kind of a good practice to be doing anyway. Hopefully we'll be out of this crisis soon enough and we go back to a normal teaching, but that's good practice to have. So Cindy Martin, our colleague that many people know, asks all of her students to upload short samples of speech every day for every lesson. That's part of her homework assignment. And so it's easy to listen to them. They're less than a minute, and every day students submit something.
If you're a university faculty member, you probably are on some kind of course management system, Blackboard, Canvas, something at the university. All of them that are up now not only have the Zoom feature at the bottom that you can incorporate as an immediate access to Zoom with all the functionality of Canvas and Blackboard, but you can simply use Blackboard as an upload platform for just audio only, audio with video, and also facilitate group projects using the consult feature so that students can actually work in and record projects, little mini projects, with using the platform they're already familiar with. I know, Natasha, this isn't going to be true for most of the K through 12 where those platforms largely don't exist. But even using, as Shannon suggested, kind of the down and dirty, taking us back to the 90s again with the SOAPI, Simulated Oral Proficiency Interviews, just giving students a prompt, as you said, Irina, give them some kind of oral prompt to record themselves would work even with using the most basic kind of technology without a larger platform.
We usually use Google Classroom. Google Classroom is available for all the schools, and Flipgrid too. But Google Classroom allows you to do a lot of things. One place. Yeah.
VoiceThread is another
yes.
platform.
Yeah.
I have a question about using Google Translate, and someone says that students start using it right away. I know we have a Google Translate expert in the audience. Richard, do you want to respond to this question? No pressure, but so what to do with students?
I turned on my mic. I don't know if people can hear me, whether you
Yes, we can.
So I don't think that there's a good solution to this because it is my main fear. First of all, Google Translate has become very good. And when you combine it with reversal context, I don't know how many of you use reversal context, You know, you can't stop them if they are talented at it. It cannot be done. I'll give you an example. I had a fourth-year student last year who was a, you know, so-so student, B plus-ish, nothing bad with him. He turned in perfect papers and nearly perfect papers. And I said, how much of this is you? How much is GT plus reversal context? And please be honest, and you're not going to get penalized. And he said, oh, 95% of it, 5% is me. And I said, well, good job, because he knows how to do it. I don't know what to tell you. I was talking to Karen, who I think is in this, Karen Evans Romaine, or I think I was talking to someone else, and I said, you know, if someone asked me to write in German a second-year composition, and my German is very first year, yeah, I could do that using Google Translate and Reverso, no problem.
There are, yeah, I wanted to address this too. We at Brandeis, all of the languages, we're putting our heads together to come up with some kind of policy in terms of the use of online translators in our classes. And Richard, I agree with the statement that if they can use it properly, great, more power to them. But usually usually that is a skill that really is developed with their language proficiency. And so in the third or fourth year, they're much better at this. In the first or second year, they're terrible. And we do want to see their work. So if colleagues are very worried about students not creating with the language, using what they know without the help of machine translation, then you can come up with certain policies. And yes, I think one of the reasons why we feel so shaken is that we are losing a certain degree of control that we used to have. We never had 100% of control, but we did have more control when we were in the classroom. So we're going to have to let go of it a little bit, and we can, if we want to support students, we can create certain guidelines and ask them to observe these guidelines and remind them of the honor code and remind them that in the long run, it is about their learning, and they need to pay attention to that, and they need to be effective learners. Perhaps this is also the time, Richard, as you probably would suggest, to start teaching students how to use these online tools.
I believe in teaching those online tools because I believe that the tools themselves can be good teachers. I would add one other thing, which is that one of the devices I do use to prevent people from going wild with Google Translate at any level is when I tell them, if I detect that it's really good and I suspect that it's coming from Google Translate, I will say to you, I'll have a third page of a test. A test goes 2 pages, let's say, assuming that we'll talk about testing eventually where you have, where you're going to monitor how they're taking tests. But in a normal test, I will say the third page is going to have a little couple sentences that I believe that you translated from Google, from GT, and it's going to be in English. And I'm going to ask you to say it again.
Yeah. That's what Daria Kiryanov suggesting. She's also asking them to rewrite things in their own words. All right. Okay. Thank you all. Let's move on. And we have a question about assessment. I know many of you have been asking this. And what about assessment? How to manage expectations again? And what strategies can we realistically use for assessment in the online environment? Irina, can you start?
Yes, so that is a big question for all of us, and I'm sharing again the results of brainstorming that we did at Brandeis, where all of the instructors who teach language put our heads together and we kind of brainstormed what to do. So one of the things that we came up with is that, well, the simplest thing is students can still write their tests in real time, basically in front of us here on Zoom. But when you have 35 students in your class, even if you have a gallery, as you know, some suggested that covers your screen, or I know Irina Mikhailian suggested that, and that's a great suggestion to have two screens. If you have two screens, on one screen you share your screen and then monitor, and then the other one you see the students. So you could be monitoring them that way, if you want to, or we make our tests open textbook, open notebook, but we raise the bar for what we expect. Certainly when we do that, I hope our tests are not discrete item tests anymore. This is stuff for maybe quizzes and quick formative assessment, but not summative assessment. So I hope our tests already are function oriented, some kind of communicative function that needs to be performed by the student orally or in writing. So definitely no discrete item tests if this is an open textbook or open notebook, because it's very easy for the students to just look up the answer. If they create with a language, then it's much harder for them to just look up an answer. And if we do tell them ahead of time that it's open textbook, but the bar is higher, I expect higher clarity of the message. I expect better spelling, and I expect better pronunciation because you have time to prepare for it. That's another way to deal with it. Another way is to replace unit tests and finals with some kind of projects. And all those platforms that have been mentioned already could be useful here. Creating an oral assessment as a response to some kind of prompt, using any of the platforms, or just creating a recording, a video or an audio recording, or some other kind of, be creative and some other kind of project that students will have to make. Maybe it's going to be, I don't know, a video blog of what I do on a daily basis or something like this. And then finally, the other suggestion that we put together was maybe to replace written tests with oral tests. And they would be asynchronous. So students record and submit, and this is what we grade them on. Oh, I forgot one more, portfolios. And some of us already do that. Tom, I know you could speak a lot about that, because thanks to you, I use portfolios in some of my classes. So again, this is a kind of a project that students would have to do. They do it asynchronously. They don't do it in front of us. We would need to give them enough time ahead of time, enough notice ahead of time that that's what they would be doing for the end of the semester. And they may even have more fun with this and produce better and more interesting speech samples, oral or in writing, than we would expect otherwise. All of this I was saying for summative assessment. For formative assessment, those quizzes that some of us do regularly and frequently, we can switch to online quizzes. Even Quizlet allows us to do those quizzes. Of course, we have to let go of our control. We cannot watch them do this. If they cheat and they look things up, well, they cheat. But at the same time, even if they look things up, learning still happens. Maybe it's not committed to memory 100%, but my view of this is that they're still learning. So that's my advice.
Mm-hmm. Google Classroom is a good source. You could set a time, give them a prompt, and a multiple choice or timely response could be used too. I'm talking about the most simple stuff to use in a classroom in terms of assessment. Yes.
Right. And if one or two people in your class will cheat, well, so be it. I'm sure most of our students don't cheat, don't take it seriously. And if they don't, I mean, in regular classroom or online classroom, too bad for them. So I think we should, I agree with you, Irina, we should just let it go and relax a little bit and let students, be adult learners, because they are responsible for their learning. And if they don't do things that they need to do, well, that harms their learning. And there's nothing we can do, or the little we can do about that.
And there's some evidence that that online classes have the same percentage of cheating as in-person classes. So.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yep.
And speaking of tools, I know there's this relatively new app and site, Extempore. I'm not sure, Sharon, did I pronounce it correctly? So that app allows oral response right away. So you can program it so students, as soon as they see a prompt, they have to record it, and they have like 30 seconds or whatever you said the time. So if you want a timed response without preparation, so you can use tools like that. Yeah, thank you, Karen, for that links. I haven't used it. I have colleagues who've used it successfully. And I think it's you need to pay for it, but I don't know, they might be offering some discounts at this point. All right.
There was a question to me from somebody in the chat.
Yeah, from Paulina. What do you mean by replacing written exam with the oral exam? How so?
Well, so we're used to doing final exams, and they're usually written, and many of us do oral components to that as well. So if we don't like the idea of having open textbook, open notebook, if we don't like the idea of watching them write the exam in front of us, us watching them on Zoom, we can just replace the whole thing with an oral exam. So it could be presentational speech when they prepare something and they present to the entire class in live, if it's a small class, or they record and submit their presentational speech. Again, it could be a video, and somebody in chat also said that students can use Zoom themselves. They can record themselves in Zoom, and that's going to be their video presentation. And again, we will be able to see if they're reading or not. Or if it's a small enough class and you have been trained in OPI, even if you're not an active tester, you can style your final oral on the technique of OPI. So this is going to be a pro-achievement exam. It's a mixture of achievement and proficiency. You do know what your students know. You're not really going to make them super uncomfortable by testing the ceiling all the time. But you could conduct 10 interviews or 15 interviews, 20 minutes each. Or you could even pair them up and then ask them to ask each other questions. So just replace the written portion of it with whatever oral format you can or you prefer or you like.
Any ideas on checking homework exercises?
Yes, we talked about it. So first year students will need to learn how to type very quickly, or because we often use workbooks and they are worksheets and workbooks, they have to use them, they have to still handwrite in them. So I told my students that they will continue using, we're using Live from Russia, they will continue using it, they will continue doing their homework, they will scan and upload. I created individual folders in Google Drive. So in Google Drive, we have one common folder with materials accessible to everybody. And then several folders for each individual student that is only shared between me and the student. They upload their homework there, scanned, and then I check it. I happen to have the new iPad with the pen, so that, Zhenya, thank you for the tip. I can just work on PDF on my iPad. But those who don't, we can make comments using Adobe Reader. If you don't have Adobe Reader, even Preview on Mac, as primitive as it is, we can still highlight, cross things out, and enter comments. And we can save it again as PDF and upload it if they need to redo their homework. If you allow them to redo, I do, then they would they could use a separate piece of paper to just change those areas that I circle and I say redo, because obviously they didn't learn. That's the system we came up with. If they can type and we do not have workbook, if it's essays, then certainly it's much easier. Than Google Docs is my recommendation, because it's easy to make suggestions, to leave comments, etc.
Mhm.
I don't know, colleagues, what you think. And Tom, maybe you should talk about ePortfolio as well.
Well, let me just tag on to what you just said, Ira, because I agree. We use Google Docs here, and it's useful for university level, again, largely because it allows for multiple commentary. So the homework can go through a pass with the TA if we've got them. The instructor can add a line of comments. We can also use Google Docs to do peer assessment, which is actually very useful, even at, well, now at the point we are now, even if we're at second half of second semester, even at that stage, we can start to play a little bit of peer assessment. There are some benefits there, even in first year Russian. But for our second, third year students, they quite enjoy doing the peer assessment and commentary on each other's work. So I like that part. ePortfolios is an alternative. We, in fact, made the decision 2 days ago for our second year and higher courses, because of the burden on both the students, but especially our instructors and TAs, our lecturers, really, on the amount of grading that would have to be done in a new electronic format, to go with a shift in the amount of the sheer number of actual assignments that would be electronic submission of written work, to lower that to up the amount of pre-recorded by the student conversation and e-portfolios, that is uploaded student work of their own design that's heavily mediated by the instructor in the course. That's actually, again, very easily done in Google Docs. It's not as time consuming as I'm probably making it sound in this short description, but it's actually something that if anyone wants to DM me separately, I'll happily give a longer explanation of how to set up an e-portfolio system using Canvas, Blackboard, anything. Actually, even if you don't have that system, you can do it via Google Docs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Our next question is about preparing our students. We say a lot about how we prepare ourselves, but how do we prepare our students for online learning? How do we consider the multiple different environments they find themselves in? Some people, find themselves sleeping on someone's couch, multiple time zones away from you. Someone has, a stable connection, someone doesn't. Someone's been using this online tools, someone hasn't. Maybe the first time, they've never heard about Zoom, like many of us before. So how do we help our students prepare for this new digital world? How do we, save those digital natives and help them become digital students? Irina, can you start also?
Yeah, so I started thinking about this the minute Brenda started talking about the fact that we may go online. And I realized that we're getting a lot of support. We, the faculty, are getting a lot of support from the university. We were bombarded by messages with all kinds of resources. And like Shannon said, live webinars all the time from morning till evening. And I'm not exaggerating, from very early until very late at night. Those are available. And nothing was sent to the students. Students were not prepared. I was more worried about them being able to learn online rather than them being able or not able to deal with technology. As Tom said, they're digital natives, and supposedly they know how to, intuitively, they know which buttons to press. They know the buttons are there to be pressed, and they will explore them. I was more worried about the fact that nobody is preparing them at my university for the change in the learning style and the learning technique. So I put together some guidelines for my students, and I will be happy to share them. They're certainly not perfect. I try to look for some guidelines online that may already exist. And what I found was more for students choosing to sign up for online courses versus for versus real courses. And that's not entirely useful for us in this situation. So some of the things that I highlight with my students, and I because I thought about it ahead of time, I had the time to talk to them in person about it. But even teaching online these 2 days, because we started on Monday, showed me that what I said in class, yeah, it's not necessarily syncing. I need to have it in writing, and so I created this four categories. One is organizing your space, and some suggestions for that. Second one is, let me remind myself. The second one is professionalism. Third one, learning habits. And the fourth one, downtime. So for organizing your space, I talked about, and again, I won't retell the entire document, just some highlights, that it's important that students understand that if it is possible, of course, everybody will be in a different situation and the family context will be different. But if at all possible, please have a designated space for your work. You need to be at a desk. Being on a couch in the living room, if you can be at your desk, is not the best setup. That you need to try to be in a quiet space. You need to tell your family, as I experienced yesterday, parents should not be walking past you and talking to you in the middle of the lesson, because they also probably don't understand, because they haven't experienced it. So quiet place, somewhere where you won't be distracted, being not joining by phone, by joining by computer as much as possible, because I will expect you to type. Learning habits, professionalism, like, being dressed, and being dressed the way you would be dressed when you go to school, being on time, punctuality. Planning your meals so you don't have to eat in front of us, because in this environment, if you're eating, you're right in front of everybody's face. You cannot eat discreetly like maybe you would be able to do it in the classroom. And then learning habits, like, for example, taking notes, turning off notifications on your computer, being prepared to take much more responsibility for staying focused in class, because you can be called on much more frequently than in a physical classroom. So you need to stay focused and be ready to engage with the material, with your classmates, virtually, with your instructor. And then also downtime, that we're going to be on this for a long time. And as it is, we do a lot of work on the computer. And now we're going to be having, some of my students have 3-hour seminars twice a week, in addition to other classes online. So it's important to build in downtime and treat the downtime seriously. So these were my points, and then I'll be happy to share them if people are interested.
Yeah, I just learned in don't disturb function on Mac, so I was happy that I could turn all my notifications with one click, and it's on the top right side of your computer. If you guys don't know it yet, that's right. This lines will let you turn off the notifications. All right. Anyone else wants to share? Yes, Shannon.
What I did was I took the course syllabus, and usually we have a course grade breakdown of what is worth what amount in each class. And what I did was I made a little description of how we were going to deal with each of those parts of the class. because I teach a hybrid class, many of them were the same. But for the ones that were different, I then made a little description. And then there were a couple of things that I wasn't sure right away how we were going to do it. And I just promised them a time that I would get back to them about that, and that I would consult with them and, hear any of the concerns that they might have about how we would change that part of the class, since it wasn't going to be able to be done the same way.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anyone else on student prep? Okay.
Somebody shared, Alena, somebody shared net etiquette. I just looked at it and it's fantastic.
So my last question to you is about engagement. What does it mean in our new environment, in online teaching and learning? How do we achieve a maximum engagement, and then again not turn our life into constant grading and reading, listening to all this pause? And how do we keep our students engaged in synchronous and asynchronous learning? What are the best strategies for that? Tom, would you start, please?
Sure. I've got just a few comments that actually I hope will dovetail very much with some of the things Irina was just saying about preparing our students for this kind of interaction online. One thing I find really interesting, if one can find this kind of silver lining in the otherwise very, very dark cloud that we're in right now, is that we are dealing with, if we take the Gen Z phenomenon seriously, and I actually very much do, I've noticed it in every single class I've had for the last year to 2 years, is that it is very much a population already inherently well disposed to, if not fully engaged with, the kinds of media that we're talking about for online instruction. So things like asynchronous or synchronous, asynchronous discussion with each other online in fairly much greater detail than this baby boomer could ever do online himself. When I think about what I message, say, my wife or something, it's incredibly telegraphic. It's just literally a handful of words. Our students can compose entire novels basically online with one another, with the amount of DM they do with one another. The use of YouTube, which more and more I'm finding to be my personal savior in eliminating any kind of grammar explanation lecture part of my class, is putting everything of that nature onto YouTube for the students' sake. So these are all the kinds of things they're already used to, that in fact, if anything, it's our side that's taking more time getting involved with. What I want to go back to, though, is just my core for this response, Zhenya, is something we talked about, and Rich, you'll remember this from the late 1980s out there, when we thought about using video in our classrooms for the first time, and we realized that we were taking a medium that every student we had knew intimately, but was turning that into a teaching medium. And what we had to do to go from being a viewer of television and things on TV to becoming now a learner of instructional video. And we talked a lot about this term active viewing and active listening, which I think we in a way need to return to as we reassess what we're doing in our online classrooms. Is the material we're putting out there, we need to get the students to understand by guided viewing and guided listening that they're not simply watching a YouTube video, they're watching for specific types of information and gleaning that information. So that's one thing. The other thing, and this is purely anecdotal on my side, but in my teaching, like Shannon, the hybrid type classes, I've noticed an unusual desire, for lack of a better word, on the students' part for more assessment, more formative assessment during the online only portion of class. A real sense that they tell me they get is not being able to know how they're doing. I think this is going back to that human factor thing, that in class when we're live, they can tell by my body language, by my short responses, all the молодец, the хорошо, the замечательно, all of that kind of thing we do in class, that we can kind of do online synchronously, but really with difficulty in the asynchronous part, they miss all of that, and they have a much greater sense of insecurity about where they are, where they stand in the course, in the class at the moment. So they like these small little mini quizzes or small assignments that in a way force them into some kind of mode of assessment to let them know how they're doing. So those are some of the things that I look at. I left out one last thing. For ongoing engagement, my magic bullet that I've been using the last now 8 years, I suppose, is to make sure that their desire for and my need for continuous engagement in class. I use a live Twitter feed during all my courses, whether they're content-based courses or whether they're language-only courses. I have one screen, and this is, yes, it's a bit of a luxury of having one screen that's dedicated on a laptop just for the class Twitter feed, where they can post comments, retorts, commentaries, questions to me, questions to other students. The students tend to follow every now and then the Twitter feed, but I follow it through the whole class, and the other screen has the actual course that I'm teaching. So that's one of the ways that one can more or less ensure this kind of ongoing engagement of students.
Thank you, Tom.
Sure.
Colleagues, do you want to add?
Please. Yeah.
Chen?
Just kind of in response to what Tom was saying about having exercises that give feedback for students that are asynchronous. I just wanted to share a resource in the chat. I put a link to it in the chat. Lyudmila Klimanova and I have created a website, and we were working on it. It wasn't quite done, but we decided to just let it out there since it may help people. It has a bunch of, a lot of it is interactive video that has a YouTube video with little links in it, little quizzes that are interspersed. And we wanted to share those with others. It's not to say they're perfect. They're not perfect. There's some that I like more than others, but colleagues are welcome to use those. You can find them on the website by searching, and we also organized them by some of the textbooks that we tend to use in most of our materials are lower level Russian language materials, but there are some for slightly higher level as well. So we would welcome you to use those materials.
Thank you. It's also Edpuzzle also give you opportunity, especially for the high school students, to find out something, not especially, but for any students, to find some YouTube video and post it over there, and students could be answering questions, and you could post an assignment. I'm more like, I have more questions than answers at this point, because in the majority of the high schools, we're just starting next week to work with online distance learning, and we're trying to figure out how to keep 14, 16, 17, and 18 years old active and keep the interest to the subject.
3years.com also is a good platform to engage students in exploring authentic materials and producing some kind of work based on what they have viewed and what they have learned.
Thank you all. So all my questions. I'm sure you have a lot to say, a lot more to say on this topic, and I'm sure our audience has a number of more specific questions. So at this point, I would just like to open the floor to other thoughts, other things that we missed, maybe some more technical questions, maybe questions about the Zoom. I know, Tom, you were going to share your thoughts on the integration of Zoom and Canvas.
Right. I very briefly, for those who are using either Blackboard or Canvas, I don't know about the other course management systems, and so please, if anyone's out there using a different one that is pertinent to what I'm about to say, please add it to our chat as well. But those two platforms only, well, relatively recently have added Zoom functionality to them, so that you can be on Canvas following your own course outline. So I basically, for two of my content courses, I'm not changing anything that I do in terms of presentation of the material. But in terms of the interaction in class, I'm going to be using the Zoom connection for a lot of that kind of interaction. So it's directly on Canvas. At the bottom of the left-hand menu, there's a Zoom link that then connects and will send all users of that Canvas or Blackboard group the course address, which they will have access to for the remainder of this semester. Every hour and a half that we have class, hour 15 minutes that we have class, that session will be open and recorded. So not only is there the entirety of the lecture, I never really do a proper full lecture, but the interaction, the presentation part of class, and then the interactional part of class, all of that's available for the students to review and to use online on Canvas as a recording. So that's a really terrific feature. Also, Canvas has added now 3, this is because of the coronavirus, they've added 3 free apps at the bottom, again on that left-hand menu at the bottom. One of them is basically a kind of very quick instant quizzer. It's sort of like Kahoot, but it looks a lot more sophisticated. It doesn't look quite as simplistic as Kahoot does. And it's also got a lot of metrics to it. So you can track student progress. You can enter it into your grade book, all kinds of things. There are 2 others, one for, I think it's a word cloud, which is kind of nice for discussion sections. And then another one for doing group work, which is close to in functionality of a Google chat room, but has the added feature, once again, that the students, the learners in that chat room can record their session so that then an instructor or a third party can review it and evaluate it, assess it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Can I ask all of us, because I can see in chat a lot of questions, and yeah, Shannon, you're answering. Yeah, I also read somewhere that Zoom has become free to all educators, but Alona says that it's still at cut off after 40 minutes, and they did a lesson today. So unless it's Zoom Pro.
I think depends how you register over there. If you register with your college or high school account, they allowed you to get rid of those 40 minutes. You have extended time.
That's right. That's exactly what I was going to say. We just had another webinar this morning before this one with faculty, and it ran about an hour and a half using basic Zoom, but it's because it's through the institutional license. That's absolutely right, Natasha.
Mm-hmm.
They've lifted the 40 minutes.
Our colleagues, anything else you want to share with us?
Can I also add something? Because one of the questions on the list of questions that we got that our colleagues filled out when registering for the webinar, there was a question about something like, how can I reassess how much I can realistically ask students to do in a very stressful and uncertain time? What if some students are eager to do a lot and others can't do much at all because they might be affected in different ways or because they cope with stress differently? And I think that's a very serious question for all of us to consider too. On top of some economic disparities too, among our students in terms of access to really good internet or access to a good computer with camera, with good mic.
Yep.
We also have to think about that. And yeah, I think we do the best that we can in individualizing this instruction. So for those students who do not have access to really good internet and computer, it could be more of asynchronous assignments. Maybe we have to think about differentiated syllabi, which yet another challenge for us to be able to complete it all in the short period of time when we have just a few days to move everything online. But I also want to remind everybody that sometimes or often смех — это лучшее лекарство. And use jokes to lighten up the mood. We cannot fix the problems of somebody's access to high-speed internet, but we can lighten the mood a little bit by making them laugh. And there are a lot of good memes that in Russian that are authentic, that are created in response to this coronavirus, including political ones. I share it with my students. There's a caricature of Putin with corona on his head, and it says, обнаружен еще один человек с признаками коронавируса, hyphenated. And students can understand those jokes. So we can find something in Russian. It can be political. It doesn't have to be political. As long as it's in good taste, we can share it with them, and we can use it as a kind of as a stress relief in our classroom. We can still use, I'm against just entertaining students, even in these times. I think students want to learn and want a sense of normalcy, and that's what they expect from us. But lightening up the mood a little bit and using those materials as a teaching moment is a great idea.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those incredibly appropriate and encouraging words. And I would just add, a part of my work with ACE's Committee for the Advocacy of Diversity and Inclusivity is we've been, as strongly and loudly as we can say it, trying to say that in our traditional classrooms, I'm not talking yet about online, but that we must try to get away from the one-size-fits-all model, because our classes are not all one size. We have so many profiles of learners and so many different types of individuals. And these individual differences are being so highlighted now, because when we may not have noticed certain economic differences, for example, in our classes in a traditional setting, boy, do we notice them when we're telling students to go buy this app or log on to this particular website, these kinds of things. I've got a quotient of my own students who are either children of undocumented workers or themselves so-called non-documented individuals in our country who don't have access to equipment other than on campus here at UT. Mm-hmm. So I think more than ever we need to, as we make this transition, not that we already don't have enough on our plates, but go back to that first kernel idea of student-centered instruction, of looking at our class not as a generic integrated whole for online instruction, but rather still that group of 20, 25, however many we've got in our classes, individuals for whom these instruments, these modalities can be of service rather than the other way around. Let them in a way give students who have or do not have access to certain things the opportunity to show us still that they're performing and can be assessed and can get the proper credentials for having taken our courses. I think we're going to learn a lot about ourselves, our institutions, and our profession in the next few weeks, if not months. So I really appreciate what you said.
And also on a safe side, I would like to say that I love joke, and we all do, but talking about the virus, for example, in the classroom, when kids have so many relatives in China, sometimes becomes very sensitive to, if it's in class, you could kind of see the reaction, but digitally it's a little bit more difficult, I would say, especially in the high school setting.
It needs to be in good taste. That needs to be, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all. Shannon, I know you wanted to add a few points to our conversation.
I think I mostly got them all, but I just wanted to, Tom said one size doesn't fit all with students, but it's also true with our courses. So all of the things that we are recommending today, of course, you have to take your own course into consideration. I mean, I teach at Michigan State University, and almost all of my students are from Michigan. So I don't have the issue of the time zones that some other people might have, for example. So the choices that I make in adjusting to this situation may be different than what you do. And I think we just all have to make the best choices we can in this situation, do the best we can.
Yeah. Right. Colleagues, do you have any other questions or comments? And actually, I would like to announce that we at ACTR decided to hold office hours, like a teacher's room, virtual teacher's room every Friday. We will send you a link. So if you want to talk about, how your classes are going, if you want to ask for advice, if you want to brainstorm some ideas, you will be able to join us every Friday. We'll need to figure out the time and the details of that virtual teachers room. But one of the ACTR board of directors will be there to moderate this conversation, but it's a chance for us, to come together and to discuss issues of language pedagogy online and all the difficulties and all the joys maybe we will be having in this new environment. So I will send the announcement shortly.
I'm sorry. I think, and we will also try to have a high school teacher and college teacher for all of those questions on our Fridays that Evgenia was announcing.
Right.
There is one question that I think we missed, and I know we're kind of running out of time. Susanna Weigand, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, was asking, are there one or two particular activities that you'd like to share that you've tried that actually work quite well in an online platform class, synchronized, for teaching a grammar aspect or for drilling vocab or for doing a speaker reading task?
I know I've tried Kahoot for the first time in my life with colleagues. We did like a mock session on Zoom, and it worked. Actually, it was fun. So that's something I would be using for this fun minute, or like, okay, so let's just play a little game, and it it's kind of easy to set up. I know people have been using it, but I never use it myself, but it worked in Zoom, so I'm going to be using that.
And also, it's a good. We're using Kahoot in high school almost, if not every day. But also, Quizlet give you a lot of opportunity to watch what your students are doing. You even could have a groups in Quizlet. It's a very good electronic resource to check what your students are doing.
Right. Mm-hmm. Any other activities someone's used successfully for teaching and working on grammar or vocabulary?
With grammar, go ahead, Shen.
Sorry, I can say one thing. It's somewhat similar to Kahoot. It's called Pear Deck, and it has a similar thing where students can answer your questions, and then it appears on the screen so that all the students can see what the other students have answered. And you can do some things like dragging things. The students can drag things on the screen, and they find that a lot of fun. So that's another possibility that you could take a look at.
Right.
But if you're teaching an online course and it's synchronized, you can still share your slides if you use slides, or you can create a Google Doc where you provide, like the most important part of your explanation for grammar if you do explicit teaching in class. It's a great time to do flipped classroom now when students watch your own or somebody else's video explanation of a grammar concept, and then online they actually practice. And that's one of the resources is what Shannon just shared, the resource created with Lyudmila Klimanova. There's also YouTube channel, Russian Grammar, created by Dr. Curtis Ford, that has very good explanations. There are materials on Teach Russian. I also have been doing flipped classroom in my first year class based on Life from Russia, with the vocabulary and the sequence of grammar, the way it comes up in Life from Russia, and that's available through teachrussian.org. So it's a great time to try to do flipped classroom.
Yeah. Right.
I think also Pushkin Institute, if we will talk about the Russian resources, they have a lot of opportunities to interact with this, for students and doing self-assessment and etc. You could look up Pushkin Institute electronic resources.
And what is the name of, I always forget, it's Higher School of Economics, a series of online, is it
Cursarium.
Верные слова? Is that the one?
Oh, no, I'm thinking about
No?
something else. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a new series of videos and exercises to them, I think, from Higher School of Economics that you can find, and that's free.
Speaking of Google Docs, also at the higher levels of proficiency, you could, and if it's a smaller class, you can designate the student and change student every lesson who will be keeping notes, like conspect урока for everybody. And it's a shared Google Doc. So that could be done. And if you're activating vocabulary and grammar, and it's impossible to get the entire class to speak to you all at once, when they do their breakout rooms, they can talk, but they can also type something if they can type, or write on the whiteboard and then save it and share it. So when they go to their breakout rooms, they create something in pairs. So you can ask them to even quiz each other. You can give each pair a list of words if you want to quiz them that way, or words to create sentences with, or prompts to discuss. So you can work with vocabulary and grammar points that way as well. So they're not just talking, they're leaving some documentation behind by either using the whiteboard or typing in a Google Doc, or even on slides. If you use Google Slides, at the appropriate moment in your slides, you would have slides designated for each of the pairs of students that will be working. Again, if it's a small enough class to do it, 35 students is kind of difficult, but 10, 15, 20, doable.
Right. Thank you, Irina. And thank you, Kurt. Yes, Верные слова, this is a portal, and on that portal, if you go onto that link that Kurt said, Как скажешь is that course that works great for second year curriculum. So they have topics that we usually cover in second year. So Как скажешь, and it's free again. But they have other lessons, other modules that I think they just lowered the prices. So, but I've never used them, but I know some people who used Как скажешь, and that worked great. All right, colleagues, thank you so much for all your words of wisdom. Yulia, unfortunately, we won't be able to send certificates for this webinar, but we will, as always, send the recording to you all. And I will actually save the chat because there are so many good ideas and links in the chat. So you will also get the chat for this webinar.